Do you ever ask why? You may think it's a basic question, but why is one of the most important questions in our lives. When we're small, and if you have children that you've raised or grandchildren, you'll see that little children will always ask the question why. Why? Because they don't know the answer and they're seeking an answer. They're curious, they're looking for more information, they want something that makes sense to them, and oftentimes they'll continue asking the question until they are satisfied. So, what happens as we get older? And why is it that oftentimes we don't ask why? That's precisely why I'm doing today's video. If you happen upon me for the first time today, I'll introduce myself. My name is Maura Sweeney. I'm an author, a podcaster, I am a frequent media commentator, and I'm also an international speaker, former Huffington Post contributor, and I am here for you today. If you'd like information on me to learn more about my background, you could go directly to my website, maura4u.com. So, why? Do you ask the question why? And why am I even doing today's podcast? In a sense, it's because I do everything by intuition and I feel like this is one that needs to happen. But more than that, it's because I continuously watch, whether it's here in the United States or elsewhere, things that go on and the issues that people struggle with, the division, the strife, the fears, and the lack of information, but also the acting upon the lack of information, the acting upon emotions, rather than the asking questions like why, going to sources and getting more information. Let me share with you a story today about one of my first encounters with why. Why has been a question that has been with me for just about as long as I could remember. And oftentimes my whys got in the way of people's authority, people's comfort zones, and how about this one? People's own knowledge base. Well, I believe it's so important to ask why. And if we don't ask why, we will be operating with sometimes only a few cards in our deck. We'll be operating with a lack of information. We'll be operating in ignorance. And oftentimes, we could be reacting based upon the ignorance. So let me share with you this story, one of my earliest remembrances of why. And I know that I covered this in my e-course. And it was a question that had to do with God. Why God? In my case, it goes all the way back to my upbringing as a Roman Catholic, eons ago, prior to Vatican II, where the Roman Catholic Church changed a lot of the rules, I guess supposedly in their attempt to get more modern and to keep in touch with whatever was going on with the times. Well, from my perspective as a very young child who actually started school in Catholic school, I remember there were a lot of rules. They were fine by me. I figured, okay, this is what we do. One of those rules happened to be that we were not allowed to eat meat on Fridays. It didn't sound like a big deal. You could have pizza, you could have cheese sandwiches, whatever. You just couldn't have meat. But we were told by the Catholic nuns, and obviously this went all the way up to the top of the Catholic Church, that if we happened to eat meat on a Friday and didn't go to confession to confess those sins of eating meat on a Friday and then died, we would literally be left in purgatory. Purgatory is not mentioned anymore that I'm aware of in the Catholic Church, but back in the day when I was young, purgatory was a place of fire, but it was not a permanent place. It was where you could burn off the sins that you committed here on earth so that you could gain entrance into heaven. Sounds pretty heavy. I don't even know if the Catholics talk too much about burning in fire, but boy, oh boy, did they like talking about it when I was young. Well, here's what happened. When I was maybe 8 years old, the rules changed. And all of a sudden, it was okay, among other things, to eat meat on Fridays. So I thought, okay, so it's no longer a sin. And I started to think about the nature and the character of God as it had been presented to me through the prism, through the looking glass of the Roman Catholic Church, who, for all intents and purposes, represented God to me. And I thought, wait a minute, there are people that have already died and they may still be down in purgatory somewhere, literally in flames because they ate meat on Friday. And as the nuns used to like to say, well, you know, if you go out and you get hit by a car and you die without going to confession, there you are with all those sins on your soul. And I thought, oh my gosh, what kind of a system is this? But more than that, like, what kind of a God is this that would allow some of his children to suffer for the same act that other children got a free pass for? I have to tell you, it was almost a devastating moment in time for me, more than a moment in time, because I asked teachers, I asked parents, I probably asked one or two priests, what does this mean? Why did God change the rules? But more than that, does this mean God made a mistake? Was God wrong before and right now? How do I know I could even trust God? Well, I want you to imagine what that could be like in the mind of a young child whose entire life was based upon the knowledge or the sense that God was always the same, that God didn't change, or that God was trustworthy. Let me say it that way. And it really disturbed me that nobody wanted to answer my questions. I would learn later on that many people don't think about the answers. People just go along to get along. And in addition to that, other people, frankly, didn't have the answers. Well, that was one of my earliest recollections about being disturbed with things that didn't make sense. In order to find out more about that, you'll have to ask me or find my e-course. But it's certainly not the first or the last time that I've asked the question, why? There is something that happens when we ask why. We cause ourselves to become critical thinkers. We literally weigh information that we get against what our senses, our sensibilities, our very souls resonate with or not. And when things don't resonate, we could continue asking those questions. But when we don't, when we are told something like, well, that's just the way it is, or don't ask those questions because the authorities have decided for you, or they have established something for you, it leaves us feeling very uneasy. Sometimes it leaves us feeling confused. It could leave us feeling afraid. But how about this word, vulnerable? When we don't know everything, or when something inside of us just doesn't seem right based upon what we are told, and we continue onward with it, we lose our peace. We literally lose our sense of peace. Now, I will tell you something else. Asking the question, why, and looking for more information, and literally going beyond the, let's say, the framework that has been previously established for us, or opening up questions beyond the frame, could cause us some distress in the process. Because maybe sometimes beliefs that we held get destroyed like that. Maybe sometimes the people that felt comfortable around us no longer want us to ask why. Maybe some of the friends that we had get a little nervous and they move away from us. And then maybe some other times we realize that we were basing our lives and our trust in things that never were true. I want to find out today, just as I do this very first video, and as I just happened to pick out the Catholic Church, as I could pick out 1,000 other topics as my starting point, I want to know if you have ever asked why. Why? And if you haven't, why not? Why not? Are you willing to be a grown-up? Are you willing to take some risks? Are you willing to go beyond your peer group? Are you willing to stretch yourself a little bit further, to grow in knowledge, to check what you know with your internal GPS, and say, does this really resonate for me? I'd love to hear back from you. I'd love your comments. I'd love to know the first time you asked why. How about this one? When was the last time you asked why? Did it cost you something? But did you also gain something by it? I happen to believe that when we ask why, we end up becoming far more aware, far more wise, and far more mature than if we just take everyone else's word for it. Not everyone else's word is always good for us. Not everyone else's word is there for our benefit, or maybe the benefit for all of society. But shouldn't we find out? And when we do, who knows what might happen? I look forward to hearing back from you again, and that's all for now. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.